So for episode 4 of the podcast, I'm here with Eric Anderson. Not really here with him, but we're on separate coasts. But thanks for coming along and joining the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Cool. So we've been talking a little bit because unlike everybody else that I've talked with so far, Eric and I have met for a hot second a couple of years ago and don't know each other really well at all, although I'm sure we know boatloads of the same people. So give me a bit about your personal background. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago. I got into sailing a lot later than people in my generation. For the most part, never did opties, never did junior sailing till like high school-ish, and just sort of was learning. And ended up getting into big boats for that reason. You know, I was this size then, so 420s. I sailed them, but not to any great success. And so I sailed offshore a lot with one of my friend's fathers, and you know, he's a great friend of mine now. And so we've done a bunch of Chicago Max, and we did a Newport to Bermuda together, and all of that. So that was sort of my high school background. And then I went to Yale and did Yale Sailing, and Zach Leonard, who's coaching there, took sort of an interest in me and gave me a lot of time of day despite me being giant. And so I learned a ton and got to race, you know, with a real program. And that was, I would say, where I learned to race a lot. And that's where I got into 505 too. He told me to get into 50, and then Matt Berry, who's another Yale alum, and you know, showed up to an alumni regatta my freshman spring and said, "Oh, why are you sailing 420s? I have a boat. Come down to Rye and we'll do some sailing." So that was sort of the start of that.
Cool. So yeah, Yale has. I'm sure Yale wins this one, but between Yale and Tufts, which are, you know,
Right.
our alma maters, boy, there's a lot of history and there's a lot of world trophies between those two schools. But I think Yale's got it by more than a nose. So how easy is it to get into 50s when you're at Yale? Was the Bassmaster there when you were there?
No, I mean, it wasn't like at Yale where I got in. I think it was like the network that helped me. Like Zach was looking out for me and said, "Oh, you should sail 50s." And then I met Matt, and Matt sort of, you know, I have so much gratitude towards Matt, because taking someone new and teaching them to crew and trying to have them race with you is like almost an exercise in futility. You know, like he was so much better than I was then, and I was just slowing him down. But he gave me the time of day, and so yeah, no, the like nothing was at Yik Yik. It was just the contacts. But then since then, you know, Matt's second boat, which was the Bassmaster, was then donated to Yik Yik, so it was there. And then I did some sailing with another Yale alum, Chris Segerblom, for the Annapolis Worlds. And so we were back at Yik Yik some and talking to all the kids, and I've just been trying to push the 50 really hard there. So, you know, there are a couple new younger guys who are in it now. Alex Tong, who's actually half Tufts, half Yale. He's sailing this year, and Adam Volnikovsky is a crew coming out of there now, and Martin Tipton did a bunch of 50 sailing there. Nate Barton as well. So that, you know, where it's like now there's a boat there, and there's you know, the alums come back and are like, you should be sailing this boat, especially if, you know, you're not the number 1 or number 2 420 sailor or FJ sailor, or you're too big, or, you know, whatever the case may be. There's the 50 offers a different view of sailing, and really appeals to a lot of people who might feel ill fit in the college space.
Right. And Yale's sort of a unique venue, infrastructure, and sailing venue, certainly. I mean, it's open water. Some of the rugged days of my life have been, you know, snow and satisfaction and a huge easterly. Like,
yeah,
are we going to make it back? So that's sort of a great, and actually one of the first days I ever sailed 50s was with Allery out of Yik Yik, and you know, it's not sailing on the Charles River, that's for sure.
No, or on Mystic Pond.
No. As much love as I have for the lake, it's love in the past, I think. So what were you doing regular Yale practices? Were you lining up in a boat every day?
Yeah. No, I did the whole practice. I took it, you know, super seriously. There were conditions where I, you know, was even. never windy really. My conclusion is that the Z420 is playing too early if you're light. So heavy wind is not good for heavy boats in the Z420s. But I felt really strong in FJs, and anything under 5 knots, which is a depressingly large amount of college sailing, you can, it's physicality, it's boat handling, and it's tactics. And so like that, I learned to start, I learned to boat handle, I learned to practice, get along with crews. I was driving then, so I view myself mostly as a driver, with the 5.0 being the exception.
Okay. So one of the things that is interesting about crewing is that so much of, and this may not be really the case in junior sailing now. And whenever I coach, I certainly try to make it not be, but there's so much more emphasis on coaching drivers. And so you went through the experience of coming out of the back of the boat, going into the front of the boat, as you described with Matt. What were the resources, and how did you learn to crew?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, first of all, the 5.0 fleet is great because everyone will tell you everything. So I asked everyone, every crew, how they're doing things, and you get a million versions of different answers. But one of maybe a funny story is I was, before sailing my first regatta with Matt, I was really worried, right? Like we had practiced a little, but didn't feel confident in anything. So I was watching all these YouTube videos, right? And like trying, and then reading some blog posts, and I kept seeing this name, Peter Allery. Like, watch how Peter Allery sails the 5.0. And so I found some YouTube footage, and then I do this thing where when I'm working on muscle memory, I'll do it on like an exercise bike and do sprints. And as I'm sprinting, I'll go through the muscle memory so that it sort of is in my brain like when I'm stressed and tired. And so, I did all of that. And then we roll up to the first regatta in Newport. And, so at this point, I've never met Pete. And we roll up to the regatta, and Matt rolls down the window. I was like, "Hey, Peter, how you doing?" And I'm just like, "Oh my God, it's Peter Allery. I've been watching YouTube videos of him for 2 weeks."
That's awesome. Well, Allery and I have a story that I love him. He's like a brother to me, but let's just say he puts on his pants one leg at a time. But holy cow, good crew, huh?
Really good.
And good sailor too. So those, you're watching the YouTubes of Allery. Like, one of the things that I've looked at is a lot of 470 sailing, because those guys do some magical stuff in the boat. Were you getting into that at all? Like, I noticed one of your tacks that's on Instagram, which is a freaking awesome. Like, you exit the boat like a 470 crew, not like a 5.0 crew. You don't have a stutter pause. You straight to the gunnel with your leading foot.
Yeah. So when I was learning, I didn't look at 470s because I wasn't as familiar with them. And then, you and I were talking, I did a bunch of Olympic sailing and know the 470 guys, Stu and Dave, really well. And so then now I've asked Dave every single question I could possibly ask. And so I've talked a lot with him. I think my impression is that the 5.0 is, even though crews are bigger, it's a little harder to manhandle, and the board is so long that it's a little hard to whip around, harder. But I do look at them a lot, and I think they're more polished crews than we are. I think it's sort of, I don't say that disrespectfully. I just say it as like the fact of them being full-time pro crews for between 4 and 12 or more years. They're better. So yeah, I've learned a lot from them. On your tacking question, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's, I think Pete is a big proponent of like hook and go on tacks.
Yeah, he is. He's military.
And I do the jibing. Yeah, I do a jibing. My view is, and I think Adam sort of pushed me this way as well, is like if you really want to, like, you should be strong enough to jump from the center of the boat in the tack to out on your hand, like fully extended, and that's like the performance move. And so, like, yeah, that's what I train for, and that's what I do.
Right on.
Yeah.
So what, we'll talk a little bit more about the fin stuff, but in terms of 5 sailing, like what are you working on in terms of physical preparedness and injury prevention?
Right
You're
now.
young, so you heal, but some of us are not.
Yeah, when I was fin sailing, my body sort of changed a bit to suit fin sailing more, and so now I have to retrain a lot of like shoulder strength and back strength, and then also like I train like arm sprinting or like arm fatigue. So like if you're doing like a hoist jibe or a jibe douse or something like that, sometimes your arms like fatigue after 15 seconds. So that's like, sprint push-ups or sprint pull-ups or I really wish I had a grinding pedestal, but I can't even figure out how to buy one and convert it. So
Yeah. A
yeah,
friend of mine broke the one at Bridge to Fitness, which is where they had American Magic's tryouts. Ben Bardwell, he's a great guy. And
I know. Yeah.
So he broke their grinder machine, and I'm like, well, of course you make the team then, right? And he's like, no, I had to find the replacement machine, and then they cut me. So they've always been hard to find, apparently. But so that's cool. So are you on the boats that you've sailed? Is it mostly crew hoist?
Almost exclusively, yes. Yeah, and the boat. I mean, I don't own a 5.0 right now, but I have one in my driveway. Well, we're co-owners. Evan Russell basically let Parker and I use his boat for several years, and now this is a boat we did well at Frio in, and so the boats I'm working on getting it fully tip top again, but. So that one is a crew everything. I really like it actually. If the crew the crew has to be able to do it like well and while racing, but my drivers have like 2 lines to touch around the top mark. It's like, well, outhaul, downhaul, vang, and main, right? And then just drive. And like
I think that the ram off too.
What's that?
You want to let the
ram's all auto. Ram's all auto.
I don't have that.
Everything's auto on the boat, so
okay.
Which is really nice, is like that for the same reason, right? I like being able to exit exactly where you want and take that first look around and keep sailing fast, I think is everything.
Yeah, there was a funny Facebook thing where Mike Holt was like, well, you want to offer the crew plenty of encouragement on the hoist. Like, yeah, I've got the spectating part down, but I haven't been so strong in the encouragement. I'll step it up on that. So the boat that you have in your yard, that's what kind of hull is that? That's an Australian hull, right?
No, it's an Ovington Rondar.
Oh, okay. And what's the number of that?
9004.
Okay.
Green boat, or N=1 is my name for it. But.
All right. Do you ride bikes?
I don't.
Oh, how did you get to N=1?
Oh, just from like statistics, sample size. I think so much tuning we do is in different conditions that don't cross, and you get you have one little change, and you think you have data, and then you don't have data.
Got it.
And so it's just sort of a tongue-in-cheek reference to that.
Got it. So you're basically in the Bay Area right now, right?
Yeah.
And describe a little bit about the Team Tuesday setup that you guys have there.
So it's like, it's a good, small, dedicated group. Reeve Dunn and his crew, Jesse, well, Reeve has relocated to Tahoe. So like 2 days ago, we had Mike Holt
on the down low with his employment situation. So.
Oh, well, I mean, I know he's coming back for various days, but
yeah.
So Holty is in Tahoe, and so both of them drove from Tahoe, and so we had 4 boats. We had Mike Martin, we had myself, we had Reeve and Jesse, and Holty and Rob, and so it's people from all over, but we show up and we go sailing, and so it's really good racing. I'd say it's not quite as like scheduled like every single week as it used to be. We're especially with people traveling more, we're trying to do several day chunks. And I'm doing many more days than Team Tuesday right now because I'm sort of onboarding new drivers.
Yeah.
But it's really great. It's like San Francisco's full on, every day and you're sailing with the best people. And it's just like, if you can do this, you know, you can do anything. We're going to have to change it up a little bit, maybe sail some weekend mornings or something to get Bermuda venue or Bermuda conditions. But honestly, early in the season, like if you're just worried about boat handling and stuff and like the raw mechanics of it, you'd rather be doing it in 20 knots and get it perfect. And then you can, you know, make the small adjustments you want to have, you know, a slightly more roll in your 15 knot jives or something like that.
Right on. Okay. And so when you guys go out, you say it's good racing. Are you actually like doing racing, or are you doing lineups?
Yeah, we race laps.
Okay.
So
you do like an up and down sprint kind of a deal?
Yeah. If it's too spread at the top, then we'll like circle around once and reround the top mark.
Yeah.
Right now we have a little bit of it's a little funny because there aren't marks in the middle of the bay. So you have to kind of race close to one shore or the other. We usually race near, you know, Christie and St. Francis on our side. And so we have a mark down by the fort, which is our leeward mark. And then we have two marks that we say is like a mid beat gate. So that stops you from splitting wide, which really matters in the bay because sometimes there's so much current out there one way or the other that like, otherwise it's just, oh, sail on port out to the middle, get 4 knots of ebb, and then tack back. So you have to consolidate through the gate up and downwind, which forces you to handle. The only slightly sketchy part is the gate's pretty close to shore. So if you go through it, you're kind of, especially if you come through on starboard downwind, you have to nail a jibe a little bit close to shore to you know, not go onto shore. But it's a good course and forces us to work a lot. And yeah.
Right on. So you mentioned that you're onboarding a bunch of drivers. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a huge proponent of like, I'm telling everyone about the 5.0. I've been doing this since I got in. I think it's, you know, the best boat in the world. I think it's the perfect level for most people because most people want to have a job and a life, but they also want to sail a fast, fun boat with good competition and good racing, right? And it's really hard to find that combination. And it's also, you know, if you start thinking about sport boats and stuff like that, then it starts getting really expensive. So like actually 5.0s are not insane. You could frostbite a laser or something, but like it's not an insane price point, especially for the racing and level of sailing and performance that you get. So, so I plugged it to everyone. And so this year I was looking for some people, like someone to do a full campaign with, because I'm coming off of Finn's and getting ready for Bermuda. And so a fellow Yaley, Nick Baird, actually, who I've sailed with a little before and overlapped with at school. I reached out to him, and he's pretty good. And he's coaching Stanford right now, so it's perfect. So we're doing a bunch of sailing, which is really interesting. You know, he's an excellent sailor, but he's new to the 5.0, and so we're learning a lot from each other. You know, I have a much stronger sense of where, you know, VMG is and how we handle and stuff like that. But, you know, he has insights from other boats and the pro sailing he does. And so I'm learning a ton about that. And then, you know, his schedule isn't, you know, I sort of feel like I need to, it's been a while since I've been in the 5.0, so I'm trying to put more days in. And so there's this other guy, Caleb, who is a youth laser sailor around here. And I actually knew him several years ago because my previous skipper, Parker, was his coach. So I'd go and sail with the kids there and help coach. And so I knew Caleb, and he's been great. You know, he's around, he lives around here. And so we've been doing a bunch of sailing too. And he's, you know, both of them are vaccinated. So it's fairly low risk, and I'm happy about that. And so, yeah, they're both great. And I'm trying to only get people in who want to sail at least, you know, 5 to 10 days in the season, because one day you can't learn anything, and it's not, you know, I'm worried about breaking the boat. You know, the risk of breaking the boat goes down a lot the more days you sail with someone. So, but I'm bringing, you know, so many people have sailed the green boat with me in the past couple years around here. Nicole Brawl, Russ Silvestri sailed with me, a bunch of Stanford alums. Like, I just want, and, you know, even if they don't sail it, you know, come back, they remember it. And if, you know, 2 years from now they're in a different place, they'll say, oh yeah, you know, like maybe I could, you know, hike hard and go slow in a laser, or I remember sailing 5.0s with this awesome guy. And I remember that all like, some of the best guys in the world are all like in my backyard. Like maybe I should ask them. Oh, and they said they'd help me get a boat maybe if I could, if I needed help. Maybe I should reach out, so I'm trying to, just keep the word out.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, exposure, just, it's an easy hook to set, I think, once you get it there. But if people don't go sailing in the boat, but there's a ton in that. First, let's revisit for a second Nicole Brault, another Yaley. There is actually a hard play afoot to get her sailing the boat. Curtis Hartman and I had an offline discussion the other day about recruiting Nick as his, Curtis is a fancy guy now, so he's going to have a West Coast driver, and his plan is for that to be Nick. But it would be great. Like, you guys have AJ's sailing a boat, right?
AJ's sailing. Molly Carapiet sailed the boat with me. Yeah, she's a great sailor.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool to have women drivers, and I mean, simply from the size perspective, it's a pretty limited field of female crews. But
Ariel Darrow out down in North Carolina is doing some sailing with Tyler, I think.
Oh, really?
Been crewing some, yeah.
Cool.
And then Angela from Germany.
Right. Yeah, I mean, world's top 10. I think.
But the list is short.
Yeah, it's not everybody. So the transition out of college, having experienced it firsthand as a crew, and now seeing, and helping other people out of sort of, whether college or simpler boats, like, how do you smooth that road? What are the bumps we need to help people get over?
I mean, so first of all, like, a lot of the people we sail with have college sailing experience during college in tunable boats. So that helps a lot. For people who don't, I just set up the boat and say it's set up, like, just drive. And then I just coach sort of VMG, and try and get them to feel planing upwind and stuff. And then we start bringing in controls, because, I can't reach anything.
Right.
I think the biggest thing that I've had to, that I've sort of been coaching a lot of people unfamiliar with the boat on, is the amount of vang you have to put on is massive compared to other boats. Because you need the flatten, and you need the flatter sail, and you need the leech engagement when you've eased the sail. And so, like, for some drivers, that's like passing the bang to me, and so I'll put it in the right place. And some of them, it's like, pull it as hard as you can, like, and then try and pull it a little more. And I guess that's okay-ish, but Mike and I have slightly too little vang purchase on our boats, because Mike had more on a few years ago and then broke a boom. So
Mike Martin.
Yeah. So the limit now is you pull as hard as you can.
So what are you, like 16-1 now, or what?
I think I'm 18.
Okay. That's funny. All right. So that's, and then in terms of, you said before, these guys will help me get a boat. Like, it's not like going to the dinghy store and buying a laser.
No.
How do you see the pathways there? Like, what can the class do in terms of that aspect of sourcing and getting people equipment?
Yeah.
Helping people get equipment. I
mean, I think, the pattern that, I only have 6 or so years of experience in the fleet. Like, the other people have more perspective, but from what I see, the successful pattern is established people who have multiple boats let you use their boat for a while. So you have a consistent maintained boat, and you learn to maintain it. And then if you're still serious, like that, that can't last, but it can last for a season or something. And if you're still serious, then the fleet helps you get the right boat. I think that going on, like tank USA 505 and looking at classifieds is not the way to start. I think unless you already have great boatwork skills and want to do all that. I think you have to sort of be onboarded, and we see success there. Mike Martin let me sail the black boat when I first got here. It was his second boat. Now it's Reeves' boat. and Howie has a fleet down at ABYC, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
People come in and, I think it's too much to ask to have, someone just quickly buy a cheap boat. We are talking about a fleet loaner boat. We'll see how that works. I think it would have to be in the same pattern. It's like, well, technically some like caretaker doesn't own the boat, but it lives in their garage too, and they maintain it like a second boat. It's just
Right.
they get help with expenses.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that works pretty well. Because then you're forced to interact with the fleet more. You learn all of it. You have a boat you can use. Yeah, I like that pattern.
Yeah, and if you don't show up, it gets repoed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good. So switching gears slightly, you talked about, and we can talk about some of the drivers you've sailed with, because you've sailed with some really good ones. But now the worm's turned a little bit, and one of the challenges that people will often present is, I don't have anybody to sail with. How can I get a good crew? Go.
We don't have that problem on the West Coast. We have too many crews. Reeve and I are both crew-owned boats with good experience, and Jesse sails with Reeve quite a bit, but Jesse's work is a little bit complicated sometimes. And, I have more time than I know what to do with sailing wise. I sail a ton. And I am taking a step back now that I'm done with fins, but, this year I'll sail, well, I got half of it from fins, but I'll sail 150 days this year. So like it's, there's plenty of way to do that. I think that so if you have a boat and you know what you're doing and you just need, a body, I think you can do a little more recruiting heavily. Like we see youth sailors who are too big, or we see, I've plugged the 5.0 to every Finn sailor I see. I'm like, when the Finn leaves the Olympics, you should be crewing 5.0s, that's sort of one route. And then the other one is like, I think it's just keeping your eye out for people who, instead of actively recruiting, who it might be a good fit for. So, like Adam Volnikovsky from Yale, I met him, we didn't overlap, but he's a couple years younger, and I showed up and I'm like, oh, you're also super into sailing. You're technically minded. You are, too big for 420s and FJs. You probably would like this. And then I just, he and I talked, we did a lot of video calls, we did debriefs, he sent me footage, and then you just try and get them good, because then you have a free floating crew, right? Like, and that's, really powerful. So, yeah, I guess it's sort of crew development apart from finding one for you, and then opportunistic when if you have your boat and are looking. But yeah, it can be tough, right?
Right on.
It's also tough to find skippers. The amount of 5.0 sailing we do is like, how many people are saying like, I'm game for 40 days a year, 50 days a year. Like, I can make that happen. I'm dedicated. I want to put boat work time in, and like, I want to, do it right. Like, and people sail at all different levels, but it's hard to find people who want to do that. People have lives. So
yeah, good answer. So going back to the the skippers you've sailed with, you've sailed offhand. I know you've sailed obviously with Matt, with Parker, with Macy. Who all have you done? What have you learned from some different ones? And what are some common denominators of what makes people get to the front?
Yeah, I'm only where I am because so many good sailers let me sail with them when I was worse than they were. I'm so thankful for it. I'm so thankful for ever. Like, and I can, I try and pay it forward because you can't pay it back. So Matt taught me everything about the fundamentals of the boat, the first sort of year or two. And then I did a year where I didn't have a consistent driver and just sailed with everyone. So I sailed an event with Dwayne. I sailed several events with Whit Duncan, who was out of Rhode Island for a while. I sailed, who else did I sail with? Yeah, I've sailed with so many people. But then, I would say my real break came when Macy called Augie up and said, I need a crew. And Augie, who had met me once or something, said, what about that giant dude with the blonde ponytail? And so, I think it was maybe my junior year, I got a call from a number I didn't know and said, "Hey, this is Macy Nelson. Do you want to sail a program with me?" And that's all I had wanted for the past year or two with anyone. But like,
Yeah.
and so Macy, I think Macy was a hugely formative driver for me. He taught me everything. Like I stayed at his house so many times and like worked on the boats with him and just listened. I learned all the 505 lore from him.
Right.
Slowed him down on the race course some, but tried. And we had a great, we had a great time. He took me to my first Worlds. We sailed Weymouth together. This guy,
Right.
And so just really spectacular time. And even after I graduated and moved west and didn't sail with him as much, but I came back and sailed a couple events with him, and I love sailing with Macy and forever grateful to that. And then out here, I swapped. I sort of moved around a bit for a year, sailed with a bunch of different people, and then started sailing with Park. I sailed with Chris Segerblom. I said that earlier. We did a Worlds campaign.
You may have done that Worlds in my boat. Did you borrow that boat from Curtis?
Yeah.
I think that's my boat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Small world, right?
Yeah.
That was a beautiful boat. We had a great time with that one. So I sailed with him, and then Parker and I got in and did 2 years, I think. Or sort of, a half season, then a season, then another half. And that's where, Parker's an excellent sailor and had a lot of 505 experience on the West Coast. And so I learned a lot of the West Coast sort of style with him.
Right. And was that always going to be kind of a build up to the Australia Worlds or?
I had to sell him on Australian Worlds. He wanted to push for the NAs in San Francisco earlier that season, which we also did. I think we got 5th. We flipped way too much there. Actually, we sort of learned how to really we learned some important heavy wind handling stuff by flipping when we didn't want to in that regatta. And then we pushed into Frio and sort of surprised ourselves with how well we did there, but we're really happy. And then we just haven't been able to push quite as hard. I went into Finns more. We came back and did the NAs. We did okay at Kingston. And then there was this ABYC event last year where we sort of struggled. But honestly, like my attitude is I want to do things right, and my level of right is probably too much. It's not actually objectively right. It's just more time than a lot of people want to do.
Yep.
So I want to feel like I'm not ready to have peaked yet. I want to be doing my best work in sailing still. So that's right now, tons of boat work, tons of practice, really hard on myself, trying to get really fit for my drivers, and then trying to get them on the water a lot. So.
Right on. So, so you mentioned that you guys had surprised yourselves by doing as well as you did in Australia, and it's interesting because I have this. I've had one on so far, but I have this mission in the back of my head to get every American who's won the Worlds, crew and driver, on the podcast. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. But and one of the questions that I forgot to ask Ethan, but I would like to ask those guys is kind of, was there any sense of inevitability before doing so well at the Worlds? And you clearly think there wasn't for you guys.
The top 10 boats at the Worlds are so good that I think, a couple super powerhouse teams are like, I bet we'll do really, really well. For us, we were like, our goal was top 10, and I think that, the conditions suited us and we made some good calls. We actually had a really bad breakdown on day one, lost a rudder while we were in first by like 300 yards. So that was very painful. And we jibed in 10 knots and the rudder sheared off. So now the rudder is not coming off. I will say that much.
Was it the pins or the blade?
So we had a drop pin system, but the rudder gudgeon on the rudder sheared. And so now we have 2 complete hinges. So we have 6 gudgeons on the back. We have, 3, and they it's like there's no space. There's a titanium pin in. It's not coming off. So, next failure is the transom, but the rudder's staying on. So, yeah, I would say there's not. For me, I'm not even worried about winning. I think the difference between first and second is really small, and could be you picked the right shift, or you made the right call to rake when the other guy was like, I think we should sail another 3 minutes because it might get windier. Just tiny little things, and they add up. But I'm much more worried about feeling like I sailed an excellent regatta. And like the Frio example is also really good because the Californians swept, and like I was not super fussy about who was where there. It's our tuning group, it's our training, it's all the work together, and we're doing the best we possibly can. And then I care as much about winning the local San Francisco regattas against these guys or beating them than I do the world's. It's our tuning group.
Yeah,
we're all in it together. So
that's awesome. So to harp on, I mean, I love what you're saying. To harp on the point a little bit, like at what point during that regatta, do you sort of have your Wile E. Coyote moment of like, we've stepped off the ledge, don't look down, like we're doing really well. Like where does that transition point come from you in that event? Or did it? Were you just playing without money
really,
to go out and sail?
I mean, the last day it was like, oh, like we're really there. I'm a huge proponent of consistency. And I call tactics in a way that actually might be too consistent. Like a lot of our 2018 season, we weren't dropping high enough scores. Like we didn't have enough variability. But I just, to me, that's also sort of excellent sailing. Is really, and also in big fleets, and it just, I think it wins in the long run. So, we were the only boat, I think, in the top 5 or 6 that didn't flip that regatta. And I attribute that to, sorry, Mike didn't flip, but other than him. And I attribute that to, sailing in the bay every day, and Frio feeling not that windy. So yeah, it's just about consistency. And then, the last day you're playing a bit of a points game, but I'm not super fussy about it. I'm just trying to, put solid results on over and over and over. And then, there were days I looked at our finishes to make sure we got the scores right. I don't care where we are, right? Who cares where you're at day 3?
Right.
So.
Okay. That's awesome. So want to get to the Finn stuff because that's super interesting, but, what's the outlook for 2021? Like, obviously you're planning on Bermuda. You're sailing with different people. What's the like vision forward a little bit?
Oh yes, so Nick and I are sailing for Bermuda. Okay. We have a full schedule set up. We'll do our goal is, it's a little short, but he hasn't sailed the 5-0, so we're going to do like probably 50 days or so. That's our hope. Mm-hmm. And then I'm home and I've put off learning to kite for too long. So I'm trying to learn to kite and hoping to learn to foil so that I can do some racing and also just sort of inform my sailing a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I think cross training is really interesting, and all the guys here have done it for years. And so I kept saying I'd do it, but then I went into fins instead, which I think was the right call, although definitely a more painful call. And now it's time. So, yeah, that's sort of what and then, there are, like I said, there are Tuesdays and other events that Nick's not around for. So I'll sail with Caleb, and that's just, one, Caleb's an awesome dude to sail with, but just fleet work and, keeping people involved. If there's a day where, well, I can't sail with my crew, but there's someone who's getting into the class doing a couple days, like, yeah, I'll sail with them, it's
right.
Gotta keep it growing.
Right on. And you guys are coming to North Americans, right?
That's the plan. Yeah. I think currently our schedule is to miss the pre-NAs weekend. I think Nick has a pro event. I think Etchel's NAs conflict with the pre-NAs weekend.
Okay.
So there are a couple
cool.
people.
If you guys come out, like, we got plenty of boats sailing all the time now. So. Yeah,
I need to confirm with Mike. I mean, I thought my understanding is that our West Coast container is being packed, going to NAs, going to Bermuda, going to midwinters, and then coming home.
Right on. Okay.
That's what I think, but maybe I shouldn't have said that in a public podcast because I don't know and I'm not in charge.
Well, it's all pretty loose this year anyway. That's cool. That's great. Okay, so let's talk about fins now. Dirty word to some 5-0 sailors, but a dirty word to some people in general, but like, how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I made the mistake of getting a job after college. Turns out it does bad things for your sailing, but no, that's a joke. I was, so I wasn't good enough or confident enough or anything, or really wanted to do a full-time Olympic campaign out of college. So I got out of college, moved out here, was working, was sailing 5.0s, sailed a bunch of other, still a lot of J22s, sailed V15s. I was looking for more sailing, right? Like 5.0s is not as much as college sailing, and I hadn't had huge success in college sailing. I had definitely huge improvement, but I was new coming in, and I'm way too big for the boat. So by no means I felt like my opus of work in sailing was good or complete after college. And so now I'm looking around, and I talked to a lot of my mentors. And after about a year, I was like, well, so the question is, I'm big. What do I sail, right? And there's very few answers. I sailed J70s. I've done sport boats. I didn't really want to do the pro sailing crew route. I didn't want to own a sport boat, and it's too expensive for me. And so I said, well, the fins are around. Maybe I can sail fins. And mentors said, yeah, that might make sense. And then, it's actually, the fin fleet's also really welcoming, and the same sort of story, So I call up the local guys here. There's a couple like sort of inactive local guys in San Francisco, but a big San Diego fleet.
Mm-hmm.
I call them up. They get me a starter boat right away. So I'm practicing out of Stanford alone for a while. And then I finally get the, gumption to go drive the boats. And we drove 2 boats with me and another local guy down to Miami and tried to sail the OCR, which is where I met Luther and I met the Olympic guys. I was sick that whole time. I sailed, missed a month of practice and sailed the first day of the regatta on antibiotics. But so it was a terrible event, but it was really cool to, be there. And then after that, it was anytime the US guys are in town, I was sailing with them, and Luther was giving me a little more time. He sort of said, well, you're not fit enough right now, but you seem into it. Like, can you get fit? Like, not as, not rudely, just, it's a reality of the world. And then, we were sailing out of Richmond, and he's like, oh, you're stronger. You're still doing this. You've been around for 6 months, a year. You keep bugging us. And so then I started traveling more, and then, started getting more gear from them and more real support. And then when the pandemic happened, we sort of had a big switch where Caleb, who was the Rio rep, swapped and sailed with American Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And that left Luke, who was this year's the Tokyo rep, without a training partner. And so I sort of, in 2019, I was almost full-time, but 2020, I wasn't home. I was in California like 4 weeks of 2020, and just mostly traveling with Luke and sailing alone in pandemic times.
Right on. So just briefly, because I take the needle for this all the time, talking first names with people. So we're talking about Luther Carpenter, who's not, but just for anybody who's listening, Luther Carpenter, who's one of the head Olympic coaches, has been at it forever. Freaking unbelievable coach, unbelievable sailor, did a bunch of 470 stuff. And then Caleb Payne and Luke Muller, who's going to Tokyo.
That's right.
Yeah. So you obviously have a very professional approach to sailing in general and in 5.0 sailing, but how did the quasi Olympics experience develop that or change that or reinforce that? What are you taking out of that from sort of a system standpoint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have a very serious attitude towards sailing. Like, I love sailing and racing to like pursue excellence in my work in it. And I wanted to put more time in than what 5.0s had for me at the time. So that's why I went into fins. And, then I was around full-time professional sailors, right? And full-time Olympic campaigners, which is maybe even different than like employed pro sailors, because everything in your life is around making the boat a little bit faster. And I think that, I learned, so one, they're excellent. They're excellent sailors. They spend so much time on it. I learned, so much from sailing with them. That's a huge part of my sailing development. I think that, one thing I learned is that the sky is the limit as far as how much resource you want to put in to becoming good at sailing and whatever niche of sailing you want, right? Like, so fins, if you want to be on the world level, you're full time. You want to be doing gym sessions every day, plus 3 hours of training, paid coaches, fleets, going through the sales are like Kleenex. So you go through sales every 10 days on the water.
Really, even with the laminate sails, and
they're so thin. And you stretch them so much because it's unstayed,
right?
A rig. So yeah, you're going through sales left and right. Like, you can't make enough money to sail the boat yourself. And you do this full time.
This is a real sales job for the Finn here.
Well, no. Okay, so that's if you want to be in the top 20 in the world, right, there are, right. The first year I sailed all the masters fleets down here. I learned so much. It's totally casual. You can get a cheap boat. You can get in. The fleet will help you. San Diego has like 20 fins active right now. Miami has a great fin fleet. Alabama has a good fleet. Like, there's, I'm just talking about if you decide you want to be top 10 in the world, top 20 in the world.
Yep.
And that's sort of, that was not my goal, but I wanted to pretend it was because I wanted to get that good, right?
Right.
I'm not fussy about rankings. And then, you can go further than that with resources. Like, you can, give up the prospects of a career in your life because you spend 10 years at this instead of 4 after college and then go, right? You can do that. You can, give up the prospect of having a family because you're traveling for 10 years, right? Like, you can give up as much as you want and you will get better at fin sailing or any Olympic sailing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I got a lot better, and I was working full time the whole time, right? For Google, and working weird hours from everywhere and taking meetings in my wetsuit with the video off and crazy stuff. And I sort of I was like, look, I'm getting better because I'm putting more time in. I now feel confident I would get even better if I stopped and spent another 6 years at this full time. And then I might be in contention closer to the top. And then if I really want to do it, maybe I do another 4 years. There's some golden sailors who can jump in and do really well in 1 or 2 quads, but a lot of the top Olympic guys are 2 to 3 quads, right? So, mm-hmm. And I saw that path, and that gave me a lot of security in the progress I've made and the decisions I'm making. So it's okay that I don't do that, and that it means I'm not the best sailor I could possibly be, because I want a life. And that's something I hadn't realized coming out of college. So, that goes all the way back down to 5.0s. And, there's the 5.0 is great because the level to get to the top is not give up everything in life. It is do a lot of sailing, but have your job and be really stoked on it, and have it be like, 100% of your free time aside from your family and your job, which is not, it's a lot, but it's not insane, right? Like, right. You could do that for 2 years, 3 years, and life wouldn't irrevocably change your life. Except that you'd have way more fun. So, that's what, I think that's the 5.0 is a really great level that way, right? No one's professional, right. But people are really good, and you have people who were pros come in and teach you and sail. So, yeah. So that's sort of what I learned from the Olympic stuff, aside from, all the sailing technicalities I learned.
Cool. So we've absolutely blown past the whatever time limit I usually put on these things. So screw it, it's long. It's a great value for money for the listeners right now. But one thing I want to hit on briefly before we start to wrap up is you've obviously had the opportunity, both being coached by Zach at Yale and by Luther, 2 of the better coaches that you could possibly want to have. One of the things the 5.0 class is agitating more for this year, and actually putting some wood on the ball with, is getting coached weekends. With your experiences being coached, how do you structure that? What are you looking to get out of coaches? What's the value of coach? Like, what should we be looking for coaches to do while we're sailing with them versus, what can we offload, and how do we get max value?
Okay, so I think coaches are really valuable if they know more about the boat and the racing than you do. So first of all, Luther and Zach are like amazing coaches, and I'm super close and grateful to them. Like they have made me the sailor I am. I think that in the case of the 5.0, the huge value adds are getting offboard footage, which does not require super technical skill, and then having someone with either a 5.0 or a 470i look at the boats. A 470i might be really interesting, but like if you're talking about handling or running races or stuff, like for handling the or you know, often boat speed, like the top of the fleet will tell you this stuff for free, and you know, people will, you know, if someone asked me, like I would fly somewhere and give a crew talk if someone paid for a flight, you know, like people are willing to share this. So I'm not sure like paid coaching is the secret sauce. That's different than Olympic sailing where everything's secret, right? You have to pay a coach who sailed the Olympics to share their knowledge.
Yeah, I think one of the, you know, we're talking about doing just what you said, like having people out there, like, I mean, for, as you described for Tuesdays, it's hard to set marks, you know? So like somebody out with
marks, running races, offboard footage.
Yeah.
I think that stuff's really important, but that doesn't require a top-notch coach, right? And I think a lot of like the mentorship, the boat speed insight, the handling, that comes from the fleet in this class. And that's a great thing. That's like a huge, you know, I mean, coaches are freaking expensive.
Yeah, they are.
Right. So, yeah, so that's sort of my thought. I'm glad that nobody hides their 5.0 secrets and wants you to pay them for them. I think destroy the culture of the class.
Absolutely.
So, but I am psyched. Like I'm always hurting for offboard footage, and you know, I have a list of basically all the offboard footage I have of myself, and it's not much, and I analyze it, and so I think that's really valuable.
Right on. Okay, cool. So, so let's start to wrap up here, and I'll ask you the two sort of stock questions. Your best 5.0 sailing memory or experience? I'm guessing it wasn't the broken rudder.
Yeah, there were a couple races in Frio where like we won a race in Frio, but I think almost anytime you win a race, it's because you took a little too much risk. And there were a couple races where we, you know, I think we had one day where we won the day with like a 3-2 or a 4-2 or something like that. Or maybe it was a 3-1, and that felt really good. Yeah. It's like I really like consistent sailing where I feel like I'm doing my job right and it's paying off. That's a big deal. But there were a lot. There are also just some days, like I have a memory of sailing with Bruce Edwards. Oh, we didn't mention Bruce, but I sailed with Bruce Edwards for a year, and he taught me a ton out here as well. Cool. We sailed with Bruce. We went out past the Golden Gate Bridge and just sort of the headlands area, and it was just, you know, flooding, so super flat, super windy, and you're just real smooth. And it was, you know, I just have a snapshot like beauty, right? Like there are days like that in the 5.0. Yeah, I don't know. I love this boat. I love sailing it. So it's hard to pick a day.
Right on. I mean, it's good that there's, you know, so much competition in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then the final question, the next guest.
You should talk to Reeve Dunn.
I think that's a great choice.
Reeve's our class president, another great crew, and he'll give you some more insight on what's going on.
Perfect. All right, we'll book it. Well, Eric, thanks a ton. I know we ran over, and I'm sorry for that, but this was a great talk. I had a ball, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully before long in real life.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. It's great you're doing this. This is really, really interesting.
Cool. Glad. All right, thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.